Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey peeps, today we're going to take a look at Fireteam Zero from Emergent Games. This is a cooperative game that uses the old World War II supernatural trope, where there's World War II going on, that did happen, but at the same time there was all these dark, mystical forces that were swirling about, and in this game, the players take control of a spec ops team that has to try and put a stop to it while the war is happening in the background. Now, actually, I didn't know this at first, but it's according to the rule, the back of the rule book, there is a book series that this is based off of. In fact, I think this is a kind of a prequel to it, because in the book series, I looked it up, one of the characters that you can play as in this game is in the present day, an immortal, apparently. So I haven't read it. It sounds kind of interesting. I kind of like the old supernatural World War II trope. In any case, as I said, this is a fully cooperative game. It's a squad-based tactical game, so every player takes control of a character, and you're trying to go through different missions, fighting against these supernatural forces, sort of a campaign-based game. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Fireteam Zero is a fully cooperative game for 1 to 4 players. Each hero takes control of an elite spec ops soldier during World War II, trying to put the kibosh on supernatural threats occurring in the shadows of the war. The game is played in missions, and you win if you meet all of the mission's objectives. You lose if this lucky coin gets flipped the wrong way. We'll get back to that. The game comes with many miniatures, so I'll just show you those now. Most are minions or elite monsters, but there are also the 3 big bosses and, of course, the heroes and their specialist allies. Every player chooses a hero, and some heroes are required for certain missions. Each hero has a specific role: leader, marksman, close combat, or demolition. You'll take a hero card, it's a miniature, the corresponding set of attack cards, and, if you're entitled to them from the mission, focus cards and upgraded attack cards. We'll cover attack cards later, but focus cards are simply bonuses particular to your character. They may be reactions to specific criteria, like counterattacking, or actions you need to actively take. Then you must set up the mission. The game comes with a small book that details the setup and story blurbs for each mission. There are 3 total operations, and each one is split into 3 acts, or missions. The most important aspect of the setup is the sector tile. 4 double-sided tiles will be laid out in a larger square according to the mission specs. Each sector tile is broken down into further segmented locations, which may have special characteristics like difficult terrain, which means you need to spend an extra move to go into it, cover, which penalizes attacks going into it, elevated, which gives you bonuses to ranged attacks, and impassable, which means impassable. Next, spawn tokens are placed in every marked space on the board, colored side up, with the numbers in no particular order. Monsters will, you guessed it, spawn from these, but you'll also be able to search there. Sometimes missions will have exit spaces that you must make it to after completing your objectives, so you'll place a marker on the correct spot to remind everyone if that's the case. The threat track must also be prepared. A token is placed at the start of the track, and the mission will tell you which twist cards to shuffle up and place nearby. Whatever monsters you're using for the mission must be gathered, together with their reference cards. Some monsters, usually minions, are placed together in an informal spawn pool, which means they'll constantly be flooding onto the board each round, while other, more powerful monsters will only spawn under special conditions and are kept in the reserve pool. If it's a boss monster fight, all bets are off and spawning works a bit differently. Before starting the game, you'll roll the d12 that comes with the game once for every spawn pool monster that will come out onto the board, and then place it in that spot. Find the correct objective cards for the mission and place them near the board. These remind the players what they have to do for the mission. Hand in hand with that, you'll have to form the recon deck. There are 2 types of cards that go into this deck: events and discoveries. Events are random cards that you'll pull that are going to be nasty and harmful and that befall the heroes while searching. They're randomly added per the mission specs. Discoveries, on the other hand, are important for the objectives, and you'll need to find these. That's why searching is so important. There are always 12 cards total in the recon deck. To finish up the setup, put the lucky coin head side up near the board, place the soundtrack CD back into the game box, decide who starts, and put the heroes in their starting position. Also, with the heroes, you'll place the 2 specialist characters. They are not player controlled, but you will be escorting them around and making use of their special abilities, which we'll cover when we get to it. Gameplay happens in phases. The first phase is tactics. The first player marker will pass, and then exactly one player will potentially play a tactic card. Note that these 2 things do not happen on the first round. Every player has 2 tactics cards mixed amongst the rest of their attack cards. If used here for their tactic, it has an incredibly powerful effect on the party, like auto-killing monsters, giving extra moves and actions. However, only one player can do this per round after the first, and if you do, you can't draw cards in that round. Since cards represent attacks, defense, and your life, that can be critical. That's the last step of this phase, drawing cards up to your hand limit of 5 from your attack deck. The hero phase is when every player gets to actually act. Each hero they control can move up to 2 spaces and take 1 action in any order that they like. Moving is simply going from location to location, even diagonally, but taking into account difficult terrain. And in fact, you can take your action in the middle of your movement. Here I'll note that the 2 specialists must always be accompanied by at least 1 hero. Every time a hero moves out of their space, they drag 1 or 2 of them along for free, but at least 1 soldier must remain behind if either or both specialists are left behind, even though they can never take damage. It's also impossible to move out of a space if there's more enemies in it than heroes. There are 2 broad actions, not counting special abilities from focus cards, and you may take one of these. First is attacking. To attack an enemy, you must use attack cards from your hand, appropriately enough. Every card has numbers in the top left corner. The first is range. If it's 0, it means your location is the range. Otherwise, it's a number of adjacent spaces away from you. Underneath that is the strength and the type of damage, either brawl, bullets, or explosives. You must discard cards that are all of the same type of attack, and all must have enough range to get to the enemy. After playing and adding up the numbers, that strength becomes how many dice that you roll. Roll the dice, and every symbol that comes up on the dice that matches your attack type for that attack counts as a hit. The monsters may have resistance to certain attacks and shave off some of that damage, and you need to kill it in one go because damage doesn't carry over. Explosives deal damage to every unit in a location, so be careful with that. If Henry the Lore Specialist is in your space or adjacent, you can actually re-roll one of these dice. Note that attack cards have a bottom half, which, except for tactics cards, always have reaction abilities. You can each play 1 reaction per instance in the game where it applies. You might buff an ally's attack or protect yourself or others from an enemy attack. Instead of attacking, you may search in a location with an unflipped spawn token. If the other specialist, Patty, is in or near your space, he can actually give you a free search action, which will let you attack as well. When you search, flip the token, then take the top card off of the recon deck and read the consequences. It might be a bad event, or it might be a card relating to your objective. Either way, you'll follow the instructions. If anything, including this, advances your objectives, put tokens on the objective cards to indicate this. The last phase of each round is the threat phase. First, move the threat token. If it hits a designated space, a twist card must be drawn and placed. Twists upgrade the monsters, giving them more strength and better tactics. Up to 4 may come out during the course of the mission. Next, activate the monster in an order of your choice. They will always move their speed towards the closest hero, ignoring difficult terrain. Then, you roll the activation die. If you're lucky, it will come up blank. Otherwise, it may enable the monster to move 1 more space or use their special action as detailed on their card, like getting extra range or extra hits or even more move. Finally, any monster in range of a hero will attack by rolling the indicated number of attack dice and adding hits, just like the heroes. Every damage a hero takes forces the player to discard 1 card. If you would take damage and have no more cards to discard, you're knocked down, though another hero in your space can voluntarily take the hit for you before damage is rolled. A knocked down hero won't be attacked again, and you may stay down or get back up at the start of the round. Now, I told you I'd explain that silly coin, right? When a hero gets knocked down, you flip the coin to its tail side. While on its tail side, if another hero would get knocked down, it's game over for the heroes. Specialists don't ever take damage, but if the last hero in their space gets knocked down, the threat track is advanced again. Finally, if there is no boss monster, the last part of the phase and the round is monster spawning. If there are any more of the mission's monsters in the spawn zone, thanks to them being killed before, you'll roll the die and respawn them, though you can lock down a spawn point by clearing it and standing there. Assuming you haven't met the mission objectives, the game continues to the next round. Now, on to my final thoughts. Well, all in all, I'll say I'm actually surprised by how much I enjoyed Fireteam Zero. And I say surprised not because I was expecting to hate it or because I'm trying to be insulting to the designers or anything like that, but because I have noticed that this type of game is really trending right now, especially amongst Kickstarter games. Usually when you think of a trend in modern board gaming, it's a theme, like zombies are the new hot thing, or pirates, or when you talk, or maybe very specific mechanisms like legacy mechanisms is a trend. But in a broader sense, I've seen a lot of these types of games like Fireteam Zero, where it's either cooperative or one versus all, like a Dungeon Master type game, where it's like tactical minis going through a dungeon, so not quite dungeon crawling, but more like Hero Quest style. I just keep seeing them pop up with respect to different themes. There's one that was based off of an insane asylum not too long ago. But I'm kind of like, well, this is feeling a bit played out. And they always have to be compared to the two big heavyweights in this broad category now, which would be Descent and its sort of cousin game, Imperial Assault. Not even cousin, more like siblings. So I was expecting, well, this is either going to do the same thing those games does, and hopefully with some different things, and that's all I can really hope for. And that is true, but I think what Fireteam Zero does differently, it does very, very well and very interestingly. And I was quite surprised by how much I enjoyed those aspects of it. Specifically, well, okay, a couple things. First, the game is simple, and that's not a fault in this case. A lot of times when you're talking about a game like Descent, there can be so many different rules and systems, a lot of times because there's that one player versus the all, which means they have a whole other set of rules, lots more cards, lots more minis, lots more things to keep track of. Not necessarily the minis, but in this case, because it's fully cooperative, because everyone's just working together against a set automated system, everything's just streamlined. Everything just works very quickly. You can get the game up and running and learned, not really quickly, but a lot faster than most of these other uber complicated scenario-based games, campaign games. Now, I would say a downside to that is that there isn't a ton of content as far as missions go here. There's 3 whole operations. Each one is broken down into 3 missions, so you have 9 missions. That's not a ton, but I think that because the game feels more like a cooperative game, it's more towards the board gaming side than more towards the campaign side. And because the individual scenarios are fun in and of themselves, I didn't mind as much. I didn't play through all of them, but I felt like I could, and I wouldn't be bored, and I'd be willing to play them again. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. There's not too much storyline content here. The other thing I really like about the game, though, is the card system. So I've said many times, I said on my top 5 best game mechanics list, that one of my favorite things is when a card can be used in multiple ways. And that can happen here as well, where a card can either be a attack, or a reaction, or a tactic. We'll get back to that in a second. But I love that because now it's like, okay, I can go all out with this attack, but then I don't have this to use as a reaction. But these are really good reactions. How should I use them? But it's even more than that because now there's other games that use the system too, but your cards are your life. The most notable other game I can think of is Pathfinder Adventure card game that does that. But it does it a lot differently here in Fireteam Zero, or one very notable difference, I should say, and that's that if you run out of cards from your hand and you would have to take another hit, you're done. You're knocked down, and if it happens again, the coin flips over, which is silly, but it's fine. If the coin is already flipped over and you're knocked down again, someone else is knocked down again, you're done. The game is over, which gives such an immediate concern to running out of cards. Whereas in Pathfinder Adventure card game, it's your deck running out. So if you run out of cards in your hand, you took a lot of damage. In fact, it could be not that bad if you take 10 damage, but you've only got 1 card left in hand. You just lose the 1 card, but then you have to make sure you can draw back up. Here, it's If you have no cards in hand and you take another damage, you're toast. Which means it's even more pressing that you decide, am I really going to go all out with this attack and improve my odds by using a bunch of attack cards, knowing that not only do I not have the reactions for them after this, but I'm going to be defenseless. And the game is not totally easy to math out like, say, Legends of Andor, because you have the activation die. So the monster might move up, and you can say, okay, well, that monster speed is 2, the animal, corrupted animal. It's going to move up, but it's not going to get within distance, no problem. But then it rolls the activation die and gets an extra movement. So now what? And while you might say, oh, it's randomness, but I think it's enough randomness. I think it keeps the game interesting. It keeps you from mathing it out, which can be not fun in a lot of instances. It's probably my one big fault about Legends of Andor since I brought it up. So I enjoy that you have to make really, really important decisions with those cards, and it just may not work out, but you have to gamble sometimes if you want to get ahead in the different scenarios. Now, going back to the cards, the tactics, those are really interesting because someone can use one once per round. And it's usually immensely powerful. Everyone gets another action. Everyone gets another move. Or you just blow up a bunch of monsters all around the board, but then you can't draw cards. And if you weren't planning for that ahead of time and still have cards left in hand, you're totally defenseless. But it's so good to do at specific times. What do you do? It's just another interesting thing. And the card can actually be a very powerful attack, so you're giving that up as well. I love that card play. It's the best part about this game, and it keeps the game dynamic, keeps the battles moving quickly. You feel like you're doing something, like you're engaged. It's much, much better than just, I have 2 actions. I move here. I swing. I roll some dice. I'm done. Here you're rolling dice, but you're also doing card and hand management, and I really enjoyed that. I like how streamlined the monster system is. I already touched on that a little bit. Again, not too complicated. They just keep it going. I think there's enough variety of enemies in the game, depending on, you'll go through the 3 different operations. Each operation has a different focal point enemy, which I liked, and they all are very, very different from each other, so that's good too. And again, the activation die adds a dynamism to the game. How often do I get to say that word? And just with their own special abilities that may come up if the chalice comes up on the die. Really cool stuff like that. And I think while the scenarios may not have a ton of variety, the monsters do. So that's a benefit. The cool boss monsters. And the bosses feel monumental. Like they are a big, bad thing that you have to rip through. So I appreciated that as well. The components are high quality. I'm not a miniatures aficionado. I think I've seen some people complain about the quality of these miniatures, but I think they look great. The board looks good. Very distinct with all the locations. It looks a bit more exciting than a lot of boards I see in these types of games. The artwork is good. The setup for all the scenarios is very simple with the little rule book. Nothing's too complicated there. The soundtrack CD is forgettable. Don't worry about it. I curse Flying Frog Games for starting that trend, if it's a trend. Tokaido had the collector's edition had it too, and it was a little bit better. But yeah, I would say the only problem really is there's just not a ton of variety in the game. It can be swingy. It can be very difficult. The coin thing's a little bit silly, and perhaps it would have been better and more balanced to say, okay, if too many people go down at the same time, rather than just, because it's very, very difficult. I think there's only a couple things that can flip that coin back over. Also, you might just get really screwed with the Discovery deck. The Discovery deck, if your objective is just buried at the bottom, it's going to be a lot more difficult than if they were spread out evenly or even near the top. But that's just the fickle hand of fortune. It's not like there's a ton of cards in that deck, and I actually like the searching mechanism. The whole escort mission thing, let's touch on that for a second. I like the idea of it. It's a little bit clunky. It doesn't make a ton of thematic sense. Like, we're just kind of here hanging out. We're just dragging them along like luggage that can't ever be damaged. It just might make the threat track go down a little bit more. But I like the idea of them, and I would hope that with more expansions, not only do you get more heroes, and I do like all the heroes and all their differences as well, But I'd hope you get new specialists as well, because to really flesh out that system, make it a little more dynamic. That's the word for this review. The threat track is an interesting thing with the twist getting stronger and stronger. I would say as a whole, the game just flows very well. It feels like a complete game. It doesn't feel too clunky. Once you learn it the first time, everything just is very smooth, which is something that is notable for this, because this type of game is usually not that. I play a lot of games, I'll even say it, Kingdom Death Monster, I love it, but it's a bear to sit down and play it. Fireteam Zero, while it doesn't have, as many of the great, awesome, thematic, and interesting systems that a game like Kingdom Death Monster has, it is at least playable in an hour, and you just sit there and you don't have to set up for an hour. So that is something to be noted. So I really enjoyed my time with it. I was surprised by how much I liked it. And I'm looking forward to more expansions, because I think that's the only thing that it really needs at this point. So in the World War II trophy thing, some people don't like it. I'm perfectly fine with it. At least it's not zombies. Well, kind of, sort of. There's some zombie type thing in here, but worm infested. But at least it's not pirates. There's no pirates. So that is Fireteam Zero from Emergent Games. Check it out.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.